Okay, film fans, here we are. We've reached the end to what I consider the final dystopian science fiction movie of the 1970s, Ridley Scott's brilliant Alien, um, starring Sigourney Weaver, John Hurt, Ian Holm, Veronica Cartwright, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton, and it just to give you a little background, it was released by Brandywine Productions, which was Walter Hill's production company. Walter Hill was slated to direct at a certain point, but he couldn't because he was working on something else. It was written by Dan O'Bannon from a script idea by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett. Was his writing partner at the time, and there were apparently some rewrites done by Dan Giles and Walter Hill of the original shooting script because what O'Bannon had written would have been way too expensive to film. They didn't have like a really huge budget. I think they had $1 million to shoot this film. Obviously, it made quite a lot more when it was released. It was a huge hit. And a few things as far as background story goes. One of the things that I think people forget about this film who weren't around at the time when it was originally released was just how tight a clampdown on security and on publicity was kept. Normally, and this I think was rather brilliant on Ridley Scott's behalf, normally on films they have trailers, they have publicity shots, they've got a press kit, which might include promotional items like stickers or headbands or various kinds of promotional trinkets, glasses, etc. Well, at the time, I was living in Los Angeles, and I went to a little shop on Hollywood near Vine, and they sold scripts, and they also had press kits, which you could purchase, although they're not technically supposed to be available to the public. But I think for a price, they would sell anything. So I went in and said, "Do you have a press kit for Alien?" They said, "There isn't one." And I was like, "What? Well, what have you got?" This. They showed me the one photograph that was released, which was of the quote-unquote space jockey, which is the H.R. Giger design that we now know from the subsequent, from Prometheus, was an engineer basically in a spacesuit. But it just looked like an elephantine-looking alien at this huge signaling device, dead. That was the only shot that they would release. So I had no idea that Alien was actually a horror film. And I took my 70-year-old mother to see this movie at the Los Angeles premiere. Now, if you think I turned pale when I saw the chest burster scene, you can imagine her reaction. Well, anyway, the movie borrows heavily from a number of sources, and Bannon admitted as much. He made a famous quote, which I think is funny. "I didn't steal from anybody. I stole from everybody." The three principal films that it borrows from are It, The Terror from Beyond Space, which is about a mysterious alien hiding aboard a spaceship, and it seems like it's impossible to kill, and the crew has to find a way to destroy it. Very similar story. It borrows elements from Mario Bava's brilliant Planet of the Vampires, which is a great Italian, creepy, atmospheric science fiction movie, including things like a discovery of an alien spacecraft with a rather, forgive me for being blunt, vaginal-looking opening, and inside is a giant dead alien at a signaling device. O'Bannon admits he stole that for the space jockey. And also Queen of Blood, where with Dennis Hopper and Florence Marley, where at the end it turns out that this strange blood-sucking, rather vampiric alien has laid eggs all over the ship, and that's similar to the egg-laying chamber that we find in the derelict spacecraft in Alien. The chest burster scene, ironically, came from, I believe it was Weird Science, a story called Seeds of Jupiter, just an 8-page comic about a strange-looking meteorite that crashes onto a Navy ship, and it has these sort of seeds in it, and there's this kind of doofy sailor on board called Peachpit. They call him that because he likes to suck on peach pits, and they bet him to suck on one of these alien seeds, and he does it, and then one of them claps on the back, and he swallows it. All of a sudden, he starts feeling ill. He starts becoming skeletally thin, and his energy is being drained, and They decide they're going to have to do an operation on him, and during the operation, this kind of octopus creature bursts out of his stomach and plunges off the side of the ship. And they say, well, we'll never see that again. Well, that's obviously very different than what happens in the movie, but that's similar. There was also another comic book, and I can't remember the name of it, where a guy is taken over by an alien intelligence and forced to do things he doesn't want to do. That doesn't really have a lot to do with it, but it's looked at as an influence. Anyway, the film, as I said, was produced by, directed by Ridley Scott. The production design of the alien and of the alien ship was done by the brilliant Swiss artist H.R. Giger, and the designs for the Nostromo mining ship were done by Chris Foss and Ron Cobb, both great science fiction illustrators. They've done tons of book covers and magazine covers, and really very good artists. Well lit, well edited, well directed. Really a fantastic movie. Just a brief précis, although I assume everybody has seen it. The USS Nostromo is a deep space mining vessel, an ore processing vessel, and its crew are awakened from hypersleep when the ship's computer, known as Mother, detects a strange radio signal coming from a planet known only as LV-426, and they think it's intelligent. So they're under obligation to investigate any intelligent radio signals that they receive. Although the crew are somewhat reluctant, particularly Yaphet Kotto and Harry Dean Stanton, who are sort of the lower members of the crew. They're under the orders of Tom Skerritt and John Hurt and Sigourney Weaver, and they have to basically do what they're told. They have conflicts about whether they should go, whether they shouldn't go, and they send down a research team, and this is Tom Skerritt and John Hurt, basically down to the planet, and they find that there's this enormous alien spacecraft that appears to be a derelict. It's empty. There's nobody aboard. But when they enter the spacecraft, they find that there's this weird, biomechanical designs, and they find that there's a hole in the floor that leads down to this strange chamber where it's filled with these things that look like gigantic eggs. And as he's leaning over to explore one of them, one of the eggs bursts open and something jumps out onto John Hurt's face, the quote-unquote face hugger. It penetrates his helmet somehow and actually gets onto his face, and they can't remove it. They bring him back to the Nostromo, and they're trying to figure out what to do. They put him in the medical bay and isolate him, and they can't figure out what this thing is, or even how it's alive. It's so totally alien from anything they've ever encountered before. And as they're trying to figure out a way to get it off, it just dies. It just falls off, and they figure, oh, okay, well, that's it. They're examining it a little bit, and Ian Holm is one of the scientists is kind of fascinated by it, and hasn't seen anything like it ever before. Everything seems to go back to normal, and they're at a meal, and they're sitting around and kind of enjoying about what to do and about the report they're going to send back, and all of a sudden John Hurt starts to spasm, and he spits up what he was eating, and he's screaming and thrashing, and his chest is pulsating, and this little horrible alien creature bursts out of his rib cage and scampers away into the ship. He's obviously dead, and they can't really chase this thing because it has acidic blood, and if you touch it, you'll be horribly burned. It escapes into the bowels of the ship, where it very quickly matures from this little tiny worm-like creature into the horrible creature that we now know is the xenomorph. They didn't call it that in the movie. They just called it the alien. And it's this really horrible dragon-like humanoid but not human creature that has a double jaw, and it's enormous, like 6 feet, 7 feet tall. And it just goes about picking off members of the crew one by one as they try to hunt it down through the ship. Eventually, only Sigourney Weaver is left and her cat, Jonesy. And I was terrified in the way that, oh God, don't let it be inside the cat. Fortunately, they didn't go that way with the script. Despite the fact that they've tried everything, they've tried shooting it, they've tried burning it with flamethrowers, nothing seems to work, nothing seems to kill it. Uh, Eventually, Sigourney Weaver gets into the ship's shuttle and lures the creature outside and then shoots it through the chest with a grappling hook. So it's stuck to the ship, and she swings it over to the engine and turns the engine on and burns it to death. And that's the end of the first movie. She alone survives, and she goes back into hibernation. One of the shocking things you find out is two things. One, Ian Holm is not a human being, he's an android. And two, the computer ship mother was given the imperative, preserve alien life form at all costs, crew expendable. So he and this computer were both in on it. They knew apparently that this creature existed down on the planet. They sent them down there on the Weyland-Yutani Corporation sent them down there on purpose as bait, basically, for one of these things, because they wanted them to take it back and study it. Of course, it's grown into an enormous franchise, and I've enjoyed most of them. Aliens by James Cameron was even better and even scarier than this one, which is really hard to believe, but that queen alien scared the living crap out of me. This movie scared the crap out of me. I had nightmares about that creature for a solid year, and I'm not kidding. After this movie, every time I closed my eyes, I saw that horrible thing. That's how good it was. That's how well made, well lit, well shot, well edited, well directed it really was. Fantastic science fiction movie, right up there with the rest of Ridley Scott's milieu, including the even more fantastic Blade Runner, but that's not a 70s film, so I won't discuss that. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed these films. I think I've run the gamut from A Clockwork Orange to Zardoz. We've discussed some of the more obscure films like Alternative 3 and Final Days of Man on Earth, aka The Final Program. We've gone through the classics, Rollerball, Soylent Green, The Omega Man, Silent Running, Colossus, The Forbidden Project, THX 1138 by George Lucas, Zero Population Growth, Idaho Transfer by Peter Fonda, of all people, Westworld, Boy and His Dog, written from the Harlan Ellison short story Wizards, which is one of my favorite overall cult films by Ralph Bakshi, Fantastic Planet, another great illustrated film, The Andromeda Strain, really tense, and some of the baddies like Damnation Alley and Death Sport, but also the great Death Race 2000, Solaris, Stalker, Quintet, Future World, The Ultimate Warrior, the Planet of the Apes sequels from Beneath all the way through Battle, and No Blade of Grass and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and of course The Man Who Fell to Earth, which is one of my favorites. I hope you've enjoyed these films. I hope that maybe if you haven't seen some of them, you'll go out and see them. They're all pretty much available. The ones that I was not able to find on Tubi or YouTube are available on Internet Archive, which is just type in Internet Archive and it'll take you out there. And they're all in very good quality too. I watched the Planet of the Apes sequels again on Daily Motion, which I don't recommend unless you don't mind them interrupting you with commercials literally every 2 minutes. It drove me bugfuck watching them that way, but that's really the only way I could see good quality prints of them without buying or renting them. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this journey through the dystopian science fiction of the 1970s. After Star Wars, E.T., and Close Encounters, all of which were made in 77 or 78, the tone of science fiction began to shift. And while, yes, they still do make dystopian movies, most of which have to do with zombies, which I think is a really stupid subject, they don't make them the same way as they did in the 70s. They don't have the same concerns about the same issues, although some of those issues are still just as important today as they were back then. Anyway, enjoy, and I'll see you later.